Aloha. Welcome to the Mr.G podcast. This is episode number 5 of season number 2. Today is January the 8th, 2023. It's a Monday. It's a rainy, chilly Monday here in Hawaii. Normally, I wouldn't even be doing the podcast this late in the day. It's 3:30 in the afternoon. It's not morning. I've always done this podcast in the morning. This is one of the very first times I'm doing it in the afternoon. And the reason being is because I'm doing this for me. I enjoy doing these podcasts. I love fucking doing these podcasts. The Mr. G podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, Amazon podcasts, Spotify podcasts, Apple podcasts. I don't have to prove the quality of my content to you. And if you love enjoying something, if you love doing something in life, then you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. I want to do 50 episodes of season 2 before March because before early or mid-March, because I have other plans that I need to take care of at that time. And like I said, the Mr. G Hawaii podcast, the Gregory Brandt podcast, it's not a sports podcast. The last episode, I did talk about sports the whole time, the whole 20, 30 minutes, but I'll talk about anything. And if I don't have anything to talk about, then I can just read from my book, okay? I have a new camera, a new light, a studio microphone. Things are moving in the right direction. Also, I enjoy uploading videos. The majority of my content that has the most viewers is my street cat feeding content. I think a video on Instagram is almost 500,000 views. And the mic's a little slippy there. I got to make sure it doesn't slip out. And that's what the majority of the people that watch Mr. G Hawaii, they watch me feeding street cats like Squeak here. But I also love doing these podcasts, and I don't necessarily want to upload that onto my main channels because those people are interested in seeing me feeding cats. They don't want to hear about sports. So I do have other YouTube channels. I'll be uploading this podcast in its entirety on YouTube at Gregory Brandt, youtube.com/Gregory Brandt, and also the clips, the AI generated clips of this episode and every episode on Gregory Brandt Reads and Teaches. And also I have another TikTok account that I upload everything on. Today, we're not going to be talking about sports necessarily. I saw a video on TikTok that had a acclaimed scientist, astrophysicist, Brian Cox. And he said something that he put into words better than I could, that I always talk about. And that's how it's a miracle that we exist. And we are a product of the universe realizing itself. Everything, just about everything that's inside of us, other than the water, was made at the dawn of time, almost inside of stars. And those elements spent thousands, millions of years, billions of years, and created us. And we're the universe realizing itself. And that's very profound. When you look at how it's easy to think that human beings on this planet are insignificant. A finite, fragile life in an infinite, eternal universe is the way Brian Cox put it. There are 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and there's 2 trillion galaxies in just the small patch of the universe that we can see. Collections of atoms are all what we are. And all of those atoms formed inside of a star. Other than the water in our body, we are made of star stuff. And now this is the way that the universe has a means to understand itself, to look at itself. We are part of the universe. I don't know what religion you are, what you believe. I have my whole Bible reading videos, but I do believe in a collective consciousness, and I've seen too much evidence for that. And it is really great and humbling to think of things like that. It's a miracle that we exist, that we're on this speck of dust in the corner of the Milky Way galaxy, flinging around a star at 1,000,000 miles per hour. That's a miracle. You look at all the things that are happening in the galaxies that we know nothing about: stars colliding, planets being formed, galaxies pushing other galaxies in this direction and that. Like, why is it? It does make you feel insignificant. Like, does God know about me? Does what I do matter? And it does matter. And it's just and the universe having a way of seeing its beauty, and that's what we are. And I firmly believe that as well. On season 1 of the Gregory Brandt Mr.G Hawaii podcast, I did a video about telekinesis and how there was a story I read a long time ago about a monk who would about a monk who had a bell, and this bell was like 3,000 pounds. And the monk would use the power of the mind to move the bell. If you went, people would visit the monk, and he would just go right up to the bell and just go like this with his finger, not even touch the bell, just go within an inch from it. And the 2,000-pound bell would move, and people would be amazed at his power. And the way he was able to do that is he spent years before he was able to move the bell. He spent years going up to the bell every morning, every day, and using his mind to visualize himself moving that bell, not touching the bell, but just going right up to it and going and visualize the bell moving. And it took some time, it took many years, but eventually the power of the mind of the bell moving, it got the bell to move. And there's been proven cases of that over and over. Telekinesis is a real thing. And another great example is the placebo effect. Science has no explanation for the placebo effect. A sugar pill being able to cure cancer, terminal cancer, there's no explanation for that. There are medical miracles. That's why there's the term medical miracle. But telekinesis, as according to Wikipedia, is a psychic ability allowing an individual to influence a physical system without physical interaction. Experiments to prove the existence of telekinesis have historically been criticized for lack of proper controls and repeatability. There is no reliable evidence that telekinesis is a real phenomenon, and the topic is generally regarded as pseudoscience. Okay, that's what Wikipedia says about telekinesis, but let's see what they say about the placebo. A placebo can be roughly defined as a sham medical treatment. Common placebos include inert tablets like sugar pills, inert injections like saline, sham surgery, and other procedures. Placebos are used in randomized clinical trials to test the efficacy of medical treatments, so they serve as epistemological tools to screen out the noise of clinical research. Placebos in clinical trials should ideally be indistinguishable from so-called vermin treatments under investigation, except for the latter's particularized hypothesis remedial factors. This is to prevent the recipient of others from knowing, with their consent, whether a treatment is active or inactive, as expectations about efficacy can influence results. So the placebo, like I said, it's a scientific miracle, and they don't give as much credit to telekinesis. The definition of placebo has been debated. One definition states that a treatment process T is a placebo when none of the characteristic treatment factor C are effective. In a clinical trial, placebo response is the measured response of subjects to a placebo. The placebo effect is the difference between that response and no treatment. The placebo response may include improvements to natural healing, declines due to natural disease progression, the tendency for people who were temporarily feeling ill to be feeling better or worse than usual to return to their average situations, and errors in the clinical trial records, which can make it appear that the change has happened when nothing has changed. It is also a part of the recorded response of any active medical interventions. Measurable placebo effects may be either objective or subjective. Subjective, an example would be a lowered perception of pain. And an objective placebo effect would be lowered blood pressure. Lowered blood pressure with that objective placebo effect, that's the power of the mind changing the body. And, you know, there's millions of examples of that. If you ever find yourself in a bad mood and you want to change your mood around, you've heard the phrase, turn that frown upside down. Well, one way that they do that, you can do that, is through muscle memory. Muscle memory is a real thing. Look at professional athletes. So there are particular muscles in your mouth that are activated when you smile. And if you're in a tough mood, I'm looking for a pen. All you do is get a pen or a pencil. I have this, and you stick it in your mouth. You hold it with your teeth, just hold it there for a little while. And what you're doing is activating the smile muscles in your mouth. So without you even knowing it, your mood is going to change around. That's an example of using the body to change the mind. The mind is connected to the body. So in the placebo effect, individuals were able to lower their cholesterol, lower their blood rate, lower their blood sugar by taking nothing but a sugar pill. But by telling the patient that, oh, this pill is incredible, this pill is going to cure you, this pill is going to lower your cholesterol. And it's a great thing. I can think of another example on the top of my head of the placebo effect that I learned about in sociology class at the University of Texas. Now, one of the largest studies ever done in sociology was done with motel housekeepers. All right. So they had a group of maybe 1,000, I don't know the exact number, but a large number of participants in this group. And half of the group of the housekeepers they had working at this place, and the other half, well, they had working at different environments, but half of the housekeepers before their shift every day, they told them, wow, you're doing a great job being a housekeeper. You're exercising your muscles. You're getting good exercise. You're getting good exercise every day. You're burning a lot of calories. You're getting into shape. This is great for your health. You're going to be in great health because of your job. And they would tell that to the housekeepers every day, and they would work their shifts. And then the other group, the control group, they wouldn't tell anything to. They would give them the same job as the same other housekeepers that they, boosted up before the shift, except they wouldn't tell them anything. And then they checked on these housekeepers 6 months later, 12 months later, 5 years later. And the housekeepers that were given instructions that their job was so beneficial to their health, that they were burning calories, that they were getting exercise, all of those housekeepers saw dramatic improvements in their health. Their blood sugar lowered, they lost weight, they were in better mental health. And then the control group that they didn't give any pep talk to, they saw the same results in their health or even decline in their health. And that study alone, just the number of participants that were involved in it, it goes to show that there is some definite truth behind the power of the mind. Another example occurred to me while I was telling that, and and it just slipped out as I was explaining the housekeeper study. But they say fake it till you make it. That was a expression that I didn't like in my 20s. I thought you had to be real. But when talking about the placebo effect and convincing your brain, um, you do want to fake it till you make it. Another great quote I heard recently is never complain and never explain. That's my quote for 2024. Never complain and never explain. And that's great because wherever you're at in life, it does not help to complain. And whatever you're doing in life, it does not help to explain. You want to show with your actions. Actions speak louder than words. You don't have to explain anything to anybody. Just show. And don't complain. Whenever you complain, just realize there's somebody out there that has it worse than you do. And so that wouldn't be the best thing. Now, the reason I'm talking about all this, the universe and the brain and the placebo effect, is because our brains the human brain is the most complicated thing ever discovered in the universe. And I've talked about how there are 200 million galaxies, no, 200 trillion galaxies just in the patch of universe that we could see, and 200 billion stars just in the Milky Way galaxy. Out of everything we've ever seen in the entire universe, nothing tops the complexity of the human brain. Now, I'm going to read something from Neuroline Health by Trey LaRosa. Pretty much anybody you might ask would likely agree that the brain is a complicated organ. It's the organ where our illness resides. Our brain is how we experience the world and our lives as thinking, conscious, sentient, multicellular organisms. Our brain is what allows us, whatever we are, to sense and perceive the world our bodies occupy. We might all agree that the brain is complex, but this fleshy organ in our skulls is not just complex. Michio Kaku, who you guys are probably familiar with through TikTok and YouTube, a world-renowned theoretical physicist, expressed the complexity of the brain in much more stark terms, giving as far to say as the brain is the most complicated object in the known universe. Not black holes, not dark matter, not octopuses, not the Higgs boson. Nope, the brain. At first glance, the expression sounds hyperbolic. We know our brains. We are our brains. The only world we know of is the world we experience in our minds. In science, we like to group like things. We group animals by their lineage. We group elements by similar properties, and we group parts of our bodies. All of us have cells that make up our tissues, and tissues come together to make organs, and then make organs work together as an organ system. Tissues are comprised of many different cells with different functions, but together they come together to form a tissue which has multiple purposes. Organs then have multiple different types of tissues that function together so the organ can serve its broader purpose. Those organs then work in concert with other organs as part of an organ system. All of the results are a human. And this way, the brain is an organ like all others. It is composed of fat, water, protein, carbohydrates, and salts, and contains blood vessels and nerves. These nerves include neurons and Gilli cells, but unlike other organs, each complex in their own right, the research community doesn't actually know how the brain works. It should be noted that Kaku's quote contains a bit more than just the comment about how the brain is the most complex organ in the known universe. The full quote concisely conveys the magnitude of connections contained in the human brain. The human brain has 100 billion neurons, each neuron connected to 10,000 other neurons. Sitting on your shoulder is the most complicated object in the known universe. That's what Kaku said. First, Kaku's figure of 100 billion neurons is the one that is commonly quoted but never cited, and it's actually incorrect. The best estimate is now closer to 86 billion neurons, plus or minus about 10%. Perhaps Kaku did not intend to be exact when he said the quote. The real estimate being closer to 86 billion does not detract from this point. The brain is nevertheless incredibly complex and comprises an incomprehensible amount of neurons. Additionally, the brain has about the same or more glial cells. Both neurons and glial cells are critical for the function of the brain, but they have different roles. Neurons carry information and are what allow our brains to control the rest of our bodies. While Gilli cells operate are the support cells. As the National Cancer Institute puts it, Gilli cells support, nourish, and protect the neurons. The other portion of Kaku's quote captures the dizzying interconnectivity of neurons in our brain, as it depicted in the MRI image. The second, and it shows an MRI image of the brain with millions of different transistors and connectors. In a review article about the relationship between brain structure and function, published in the journal Behavioral Science, the author states the main hypothesis is that the anatomic architecture conditions, but does not determine the neural network dynamic. The functional connectivity cannot be explained only considering the anatomical substrate. In other words, when researchers study the brain's physical structure, they cannot completely explain the mechanisms that give rise to the brain's function, such as sensory perception, processing, or memory formation and storage. What researchers do understand, at least to a better degree, is which part of the brains are involved in certain processes. The function of the brain that is maybe the most mysterious is consciousness, which lies on the precipice of science and philosophy. I think, therefore I am, pondered Rene Descartes several hundred years ago about this very question. This idea that the world we're consciously perceiving is the very moment must be real, since we believe we are experiencing it. This is a question that is inextricably linked to the function of the brain, but is one that is uniquely challenging because we are quite literally conscious, embodied, investigating itself. Other research inquiries, such as into cures for neurocognitive conditions, are inquiries into brain dysfunction. Research into consciousness is into one of the most fundamental puzzling questions of human existence. The question of consciousness has earned the title of the mind-body problem. with a history that goes back thousands of years. The crux of this question is whether the mental phenomena we experience is directly related to and only due to the physical anatomy of our brains or not. Many questions remain about the most complicated object in the universe, but these questions are fundamental important to humanity for many reasons. First, there is something intrinsically important about understanding a 3-pound organ in our skulls that we use not only to perceive the world around us, but to actually investigate the way it gives rise to our own ability to investigate these research questions. Our ability and desire to understand the world and continue trying to figure out our place in the universe and history is one of those most special parts of humanity. We seek the answer to these questions, and I suspect that within every person there is a desire to understand why we exist at all. So what do you think? Is the brain the most complicated thing in the entire universe? Do we have free will? Are we insignificant? Put your ideas in the comments. I normally, like I said, don't do a podcast this late. I wake up before 3 a.m. every day. So 3 o'clock in the afternoon is equivalent to 7 at night for somebody that wakes up at 7 a.m. But I am doing this every day, and I am happy to do this, and I am glad that I do this. I didn't have a script today. 5 minutes before the podcast, I decided what I was going to talk about, and I'm going to do the same thing every day if I have to. The hardest thing about doing anything is just getting started. 80% of success is just showing up, and that's included in this podcast. It's even more of that with this podcast. 90% of this podcast is just showing up. Just setting everything up, getting the mic, getting the light, getting the camera, and showing up. And that's what I'm doing. So thank you for listening. If you can hear the sound of my voice, listen to more episodes. This is the second season of the Mr. G podcast. There's actually a few different Mr. G podcasts out there. So you can look up Gregory Brandt podcast, Mr. G Hawaii podcast. Do a little searching and you can find it. Also, episodes in their entirety on my main YouTube channel. I should say that my first YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gregory Brandt and twitter.com/Gregory Brandt. All right. Thank you guys for listening. And I'll talk to you later. Everybody have a great day. Aloha.